You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. I hope you had a good week off. Thanksgiving to some, screw the Indigenous Peoples Day to others. I hope that you and your family, if you saw family, were all of one opinion and we didn't kill each other with fratricide, soricide, matricide, or any of the other sides, and that you're rested and ready for the next set of traumas that we seem to be facing day by day in this country. We do have two wonderful women as guests. Amani Al-Khatahtbeh is here. She is a young Muslim woman who has built the most popular #1 Muslim women's blog in the country and has just come out with a new book, Muslim Girl. And we also have Miriam Yeung, who will teach you things you never knew and didn't even know you didn't know about the Asian American community. And before we do any of this, we need to go inside the headlines. You may have been party to conversations about how come 298 American counties, which were carried twice by Obama, could possibly have flipped to Trump. Well, Sean McElwee reported in Salon on research that in retrospect seems obvious. First, this was hardly a critical mass of voters. According to YouGov polling data, only 7% of Obama voters flipped, and the real number might be even less. And those voters who converted to Trump expressed high levels of racial resentment, high enough to be statistically significant in a model that controlled for party, ideology, education, age, gender, income, and views on economics and trade. Racial resentment was measured by such statements as, Irish, Italian, and other minorities overcame prejudice and worked their way up. Black people should do the same without any special favors. That was almost a constant among white Trump voters. Well, moving right along past the fact that the Irish and Italians arrived as immigrants, not as abducted, enslaved people, the polling data leads us to the obvious. Just because a citizen voted for a black president does not translate into the end of racism either in that individual or in the society. To many voters, Obama was an exception to his race. Editor of the Harvard Law Review, an author, a state senator, and a U.S. senator. Oh, and yes, and the Nobel Peace Prize winner. Don't you remember that Vice President Biden, once referred to then Senator Obama as being so clean and so articulate? My God. In the minds of such Obama-turned-Trump voters, proud of themselves for their earlier vote for that exception to his race, that does not translate into thinking for one moment that a young black man being beaten to a pulp by cops just might conceivably not have deserved that. Such people believe something is racist only if it's a lynching, and believe something is sexist only if it's a rape-murder. Layers, degrees, complexities, apparently and conveniently, evade them. And that leads us to the next item. In the wake of the Neo-Nazi National Policy Institute gathering in Washington, D.C., during which the attendees confirmed their belief that America was meant for white people only, and during which they offered the Nazi salute in praise of Trump, shouting, "Hail Trump!" and referring to the lying press in the German pejorative Lügenpresse. Well, in the wake of all that fun, and in an unprecedented public gesture, the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum issued a statement reminding Americans that the Holocaust, quote, did not begin with killing, it began with words, close quote. Speaking of words, I'm sure you heard that in one of his midnight seizures, Trump tweeted that anyone burning the American flag should lose their citizenship or spend a year in jail. Well, I'm sure you also heard that even Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell hurried to the nearest microphone to reaffirm that flag burning is constitutionally protected speech via the First Amendment and has also been reaffirmed as such not once but twice by the U.S. Supreme Court. Also, of course, the 14th Amendment guarantees that a citizen can't be stripped of her or his citizenship. But you might not have heard that a Trump spokesman, Jason Miller, told CNN shortly after Trump's tweet that flag burning should be illegal, and implied that Trump might float legislation to pull that off. That was followed by a real winner from Rudy Giuliani, Trump crony and Secretary of State wannabe, saying, quote, "Freedom is not a concept in which people can do anything they want, be anything they can be. Freedom is about authority. Freedom is about the willingness to cede to lawful authority a great deal of discretion about what you do." Period, close quote. Well, now for something completely different. We need something different. This past week saw an announcement from the Vatican that Pope Francis will allow priests throughout the world to grant absolution for abortion, making permanent a policy that he announced a year ago during the Catholic Year of Mercy. Of course, he restated his opposition to abortion as a grave sin, but he refused to put it beyond the reach of, quote, God's mercy. Previously, abortion was considered a reserved sin, interesting phrase, meaning that permission to grant forgiveness had to come from a bishop. Now the right is extended to all priests. I mean, this doesn't mean a whole lot to most women, but I acknowledge that it probably does mean something to observant Catholic women, and although authority remains in the hands of male priests, it's a small genuflect forward. Wiped into almost total invisibility in the press, except for coverage by SBS Australian World Broadcasting, Palestinian and Israeli women went on a 2-day march in late October through all of Israel and West Bank for peace. They walked and chanted arm in arm, singing "We Shall Overcome" in Arabic and Hebrew, and they ended with a sit-down in front of Benjamin Netanyahu's office. Thousands of them. We should celebrate these women, many of whom, I'm sure, participated in secrecy from or in defiance of husbands and families and bosses, and we should be outraged that this did not make world headlines. Changing locales to South Korea, thousands demonstrated in Seoul, the capital, to demand the resignation of President Park Geun-hye in the latest of weekly protests against her. She's been accused by prosecutors of helping a woman friend commit extortion and has faced the possibility of impeachment, but she's now offering to resign rather than be impeached. Now, South Korean politicians have been so regularly plagued with corruption scandals that it almost seems a job requirement, as it could seem in Brazil, for that matter, where former President Dilma Rousseff was impeached and shunted from office. And although I, for one, don't know in sufficient detail enough about the guilt or innocence of either woman, I think it bears noticing that feminists in both countries have said publicly that a great deal of the opprobrium against both women was based in pure sexism. Ms. Park had never been considered a champion of women's rights, and, Ms. Rousseff only sort of, when it seemed convenient. Nonetheless, as one anti-Park Korean demonstrator, Kim Yoo-en-jiang, said, quote, "We have had more than our share of outrageous male politicians, but now I feel men are saying with a smirk on their faces, 'See, this is what we get when we have a woman president for a change.'" Yeah, well, in politics, as everywhere else, what sins men do is normal. Just boys, or only human. What women do has to be pure. Back on the home front, Goddess bless the mayors, our mayors of many U.S. cities, including Los Angeles, Boston, Philadelphia, San Francisco, Oakland, Chicago, and, of course, my beloved New York. They have pledged to keep their metropolises sanctuary cities and to refuse to cooperate with immigration agents seeking undocumented persons for deportation. Now, this might cost dearly, and it's worth, I think, every penny. Trump spokespeople have warned that they will bring the full power of the federal government to discourage such rebellious interference. The federal government has never tried to crack down on sanctuary cities, but now the word is out from the Trump administration to be, if you want to defy the federal government and hide and accommodate illegal aliens and give them services they don't deserve, don't expect us to pay for your services. In other words, they might pull all federal funding, as well as fighting such city policies in court, or even prosecuting city leaders. We need to stand by our mayors, because the mayors are positioning this as a city's rights issue, even in conservative states, although there's no formal basis legally for cities' rights. But they're going to try that, and they intend to continue demonstrating the power of resistance. We can be proud of these mayors and our urban rebellion. We can also be proud of Sally Busby, a veteran journalist with experience in both international and U.S. news coverage, who has just been named executive editor and senior vice president of the Associated Press, effective January 1st. Busby will oversee a global news operation that includes journalists working in more than 260 locations in 106 countries. She's not the first woman to head the AP, but she is fierce. She says, "The AP's mission of strong, impartial, fact-based journalism has never been more important." And not coincidentally, the AP has also just announced new guidelines that unless directly quoting someone, they will not use the euphemistic term alt-right, but instead will factually describe such groups as white supremacy, male supremacy, and or white nationalist. The Washington Post, the New York Times, and NPR have all stated that the term alt-right is not to be used unless it's explained factually. Personally, I think the term neo-Nazi is short, clear, and to the point. It's time for a brief pause here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and I'll be back directly with my first guest, who will raise our spirits. She is young, smart, and she writes the most popular Muslim women's blog in the United States of America. Don't go away.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back, and let's get right to my first guest. Amani Al-Khatahtbeh. That's Al-Khatahbeh, Khatahtbeh. Amani is the founder and editor-in-chief of MuslimGirl.com, which is the #1 Muslim women's blog in the United States. And she's now come out with a book called Muslim Girl, A Coming of Age. She was only 9 years old when the towers went down in 9/11, and she watched from her home in New Jersey as it happened. And that same year, she heard her first racial slur. And it continued from there. So when she was only a teenager, she founded this blog, MuslimGirl.com, and a fine book has come out of it. Here is Amani, the author of Muslim Girl, A Coming of Age. Amani, welcome to the program. Marhaba. Salam alaikum.
Alaikum assalam. Thank you so much for having me.
The book is called Muslim Girl, A Coming of Age, and is it ever? You are, you know the phrase young, gifted, and black from Lorraine Hansberry. You are young, gifted, and Muslim, American.
Thank you so much.
Of Jordanian and Palestinian parentage. And what a good writer you are. And you founded the most, what has become the single most popular Muslim blog in the country, Muslim Girl. Start by telling us how the blog got started.
The blog got started because a 17-year-old girl was really frustrated with the way that the media was treating Muslim women. You know, for me, it was kind of born from this feeling of neglect, this feeling of ostracization. You know, I was bullied for much of my growing up, especially post 9/11, and it was really difficult for me to connect with my surroundings because of the way that, you know, all the messaging in the media kept telling me that I don't belong. You know, you're a terrorist. Right. All these people were speaking on my behalf, and they never looked like me. They never were actually Muslim women that were in the conversation speaking on their behalf. And I felt like there had to be other Muslim girls my age, part of my generation, that also grew up post 9/11 that had to have had similar experiences and felt the same way that I did. So I took to the internet like any millennial would. And I just wanted to create a space where we could connect with each other, find each other, and have those conversations amongst ourselves, that we weren't finding in the media.
Yeah. I mean, that's an amazingly gutsy thing for somebody to do as a young teenager. Particularly since the internet, has become, Twitter, Facebook. I mean, a lot of what I call the pale male, right wing, attacks any woman for standing up and saying almost anything, with, rape threats and vicious language and so forth. So you must have gotten a hell of a lot of opprobrium, for doing that from the other side, as it were.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that for us, the whole point is that we want to increase the media representation of Muslim women. Like, for us, especially over the greater part of the past decade and a half since 9/11 happened, since the start of the war on terror, those foreign policies have kind of rested on the shoulders of Muslim women. Like we had Laura Bush in 2001 saying we need to go into Afghanistan and liberate the women from the Taliban because they're oppressed, and we need to save them from the civilization and things like that. And she really made it this kind of like hijacking of the Muslim women's narrative, when at the time there was a lot of Afghan women activists on the ground in civic society, asserting their own autonomy and taking part in pushing back against the status quo and what they were enduring at the time. Right. And then we know in retrospect that the Afghanistan war disrupted and impacted Muslim women and children more than anyone. Yeah. So that's why it's like we are able, by extension, if we rob Muslim women of their voices, if we continue speaking over them and about them, then by extension, we create these really faulty policies, these really faulty domestic and foreign policies that are detrimental to Muslim communities. And I think that that's kind of our way of taking back that power. It's by creating a strong presence for Muslim women's voices in today's society. Yeah,
that is just incalculably important, I think, because all women are. This happens to some extent, but obviously today in today's world, Muslim women are getting the absolute crunch of the worst of it as political footballs and as the. It's sort of like they think that there's a blank screen on which they can project all of their stereotypes about Muslim women. We saw it. We saw it with the Khan family. During the run up to the election, where the mother, because she completely understandably fell apart whenever she talked about the loss of her son, did not speak in that first appearance, and the father did incredibly eloquently. And immediately Trump responded by saying that it must be because the mother was not allowed to speak. Makes you crazy.
Shocking. I mean, obviously, it has impact on Muslim women around the world. It's very demoralizing. And I do believe that us as Muslim women living in Western countries, especially the countries that are exporting these foreign policies, we have a very unique position to play. We have a very unique role. I refer to us in the book as the gatekeepers to the rest of the Muslim world because, we're the ones that are on the ground here. We're the ones that are able to shift that perspective and shift that narrative. I say all the time that, for me personally, my experience as a Muslim woman after the war on terror started is of the most privileged experiences. My experiences, as shocking as they may seem in the book with the Islamophobia I've experienced, they're literally like nothing compared to a lot of the violence that even just the recipients of our foreign policy have had to endure, or even just other Muslim women in the West have had to experience. Like a woman on 9/11 this year, in Manhattan was set on fire in the street. Yes. Which was ridiculous, But I do think that because we are in, we have this unique role where we're able to, it's kind of like our experience is the other side of the coin, right? It's like, even though it's more privileged, it's the flip side of Islamophobia and how Islamophobia manifests itself on different walks of life. So for us, it's like, our lived experience can kind of shape the path and the direction that we're going in right now. And especially with this past election, that's really the position that we've had to play. It's like we have had to push back against this hateful rhetoric that was at our expense, and that we knew, would be detrimental not just to us but to countless Muslim families around the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the type of impact that we're dealing with.
And be reflected in actual policy. We know bullying is up in schools. We know in kindergartens, there was a recent teacher survey done, and in kindergartens, we covered it on the show, kids are beating up other kids, Muslim kids in particular, and calling them bombers and terrorists. And, we're talking kindergarten, for God's sweet sake.
I think that's really the saddest part of this election season. It's the really horrible damage it's caused on, just the level of tolerance in our country. And for us, as the American Muslim community, we have been tirelessly working, especially since 9/11, to reshift that perspective, to push back against those stereotypes, to, just not allow people to commonly equate Islam with terrorism as they have been, so inaccurately and just so damagingly. But, it's like with this 1 year, we were able to reverse all of the progress that we've done over the past decade.
Yes,
and that's something that is very, very hurtful. To hear civil rights organizations say that they haven't seen this level of Islamophobia since immediately after 9/11 is disheartening. We fought to make that change happen.
I know.
And it's really sad that not only did that take place, but it took place in an election for the highest office in the land. And you would expect that it would be symbolic of something much greater than that.
It's devastating. It absolutely is devastating. And also the profound, staggering level of ignorance always gets me, because after a certain point, if people don't know things, in this case about Islam, okay, it can't be blamed for not knowing something, although I would point out that our education system and the media is not doing either of their jobs. But, okay, but then after you know that you don't know it, then to continue to not know anything is what I call willful ignorance. And so, in speeches and stuff, I go around, you do this to the 10th power, saying, did you know that there were 22 women's rights journals in Lebanon alone in the 1920s and 30s, and everybody falls over sideways.
Absolutely.
Who gave us the fork? Who gave us mathematics? And the history of women in Islam is particularly notable and fascinating.
Absolutely. And for me too, over the past year with all of, the just like the comments that I've been putting out there, the narrative that I've been trying to contribute and things like that. I'm one of many Muslim women that feel the same way, and that have been pushing back against the status quo, have been taking initiative and innovating and really, elevating their own voices in today's society. And for me, I think that it's also a symptom of this Islamophobia, that one of the criticisms that I receive is, you only sound this way because you're an American. You only are, all about women's empowerment because you're privileged enough to be born in the West, or things like that. And it's like, as if I'm some type of extraordinary outlier, look at the way that we looked at Ghazala Khan, right?
Yeah, right.
But it's no, Muslim women are walking in a legacy of speaking truth to power, and every society in which they've lived, in which there has been a major social upheaval, Muslim women have been at the forefront of that.
Yes.
And that's really what we do, and I think that's the way that we need to change people's perceptions about who Muslim women are.
Yeah.
And I do think that if we do change who they see Muslim women as, then it inevitably will change their perception of Muslim men, of Muslim culture and society as well. It's all interconnected.
That's right. And the tone of your writing in the blog and in this wonderful book is ought to allay some of their I don't know, bigoted terrorists. I don't know that they'll ever read the book. But, this is somebody who's sitting at Olive Garden and chatting with her friends, So how do they relate to somebody who's sitting at Olive Garden and chatting with her friends, as this horrifying, alien creature with 17 heads, all of them veiled, who comes from some bizarre place? I mean, of course it's, bigotry of no form is logical. I mean, that's the problem, but you are going a far way toward, eradicating it and toward lowering it. I salute you for your courage and your good writing and your good humor. And the blog is called Muslim Girl. It is the #1 Muslim blog in the country, and it deserves that. And the book is called Muslim Girl, A Coming of Age, and we've been talking with Amani Al-Khatahtbeh. Shukran Atir. Thank you so much.
Shukran to you. Thank you so much for having me. It's been such a pleasure.
And good luck and stay safe.
Thank you.
And now it's time for the Surrealism Corner. In order to keep the Surrealism Corner from being all Trump all the time, I'm trying to focus on other parts of the planet and of humanity that are surreal. And I definitely have found two unbelievable ones. One in Japan 2 weeks ago, Space World, which is on the southwestern Japanese island of Kyushu, opened an ice skating rink that featured about 5,000 fish and other sea creatures, wait for it, frozen beneath the surface. Well, of course, the rink got unprecedented attraction, which was the aim, but a public furor broke out on social media, with many justly accusing the amusement park of cruelty to animals. One commentator wrote on Facebook, "Why do they do such a thing in such awful taste? Playing on the dead fish in the ice is nothing but insanity. Isn't it a desecration of lives?" Well, Space World then apologized on its website and said it would close the rink until further notice. "We seriously take to heart," they said, "a lot of various opinions, such as, you shouldn't use these creatures in entertainments or events," or "poor fish." That's what the announcement on the home page read. "We deeply apologize to all those who had unpleasant feelings about the ice aquarium. We had thought we could provide an opportunity for visitors to enjoy ice skating while learning about various kinds of fish." It leaves you speechless. But not as speechless as the other item leaves you, also having to do with ice. Okay, this one was in Moscow, and staged on a celebrity ice dancing show on Russian television. It's called Ice Age, and the jury was wowed by a particular performance and awarded the performers Tatiana Navka. She's a former Olympic ice skater, and her dancing partner Andrei Burkovsky perfect marks. What was their dance? Wait for it and do sit down. Dressed as concentration camp inmates, each of them wearing a striped uniform with a yellow Star of David sewn on it, the couple glided in harmony, according to reports, moving to a song from the 1997 Holocaust film Life is Beautiful. Barking dogs were heard in the soundtrack, and the routine ended with simulated machine gun fire and the woman looking, stunned and stricken, standing alone on the ice. A number of observers, not masses, said they found it tasteless and offensive. There was a similar controversy last April when a Russian actor performed in a dancing competition showing a man wearing a Nazi uniform and a terrified Jewish girl who was promoted to a lawmaker. And at that point it was suggested that such depictions be banned. This just takes my breath away. Has the entire species gone insane, not just in our country, but everywhere? it makes me want to go out in the middle of the night to my tiny city garden and stand there stretching my arms to the sky and pleading with any life that is intelligent out there in the universe, because it certainly isn't on this planet. Come and take me home, please. Want to go home, want to go home. Here it's surreal. It's time for another break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. And, of all the past analysis over the election and the black community and the Latino community and this community and that, there's been almost no mention of the Asian American community or the Asian American and Pacific Islander community. And if you're curious about that, stay tuned. It's coming right up.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And we're back again. My next guest, Miriam Yeung, is the executive director of the National Asian Pacific American Women's Forum. That organization is the only national multi-issue progressive organization in the country which is dedicated to social justice and human rights for Asian American and Pacific Islander, AAPI, women and girls. Prior to working with NAPOF, she was the Director of Public Policy and Government Relations in a 10-year career at the Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, and Transgender Community Center in New York City. And she has been recognized and awarded for her work by the Ms. Foundation's Women of Vision Award, by the National Council for Research on Women, and by the New York City Council, among others. She was born in Hong Kong and raised in the projects of Brooklyn, and she is really great. Here is Miriam Yeung. Miriam, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
I'm glad you're here. The Asian and Pacific community, the women in particular, of course, as always, gets overlooked because of the quote-unquote model minority image, and because it tends to be somewhat quieter, or used to be somewhat quieter in its suffering, and only recently, with terrific George Takei taking to the airways to remind the country about internment camps that are now being suggested for Muslims, then people do a double take. Talk to us. I want to talk about NAPOF, but talk to us first about the reaction in the community to the election.
Of course, I think our community in the Asian American Pacific Islander community, we're reeling just as the rest of the country is. Yeah. In terms of post-election analysis, I think it's important to tell the story the right way. And I know that the national post-election poll, which included a line about Asian Americans, was not as accurate as some of the internal polling that the Asian American community was able to do itself. We were able to sample a much larger population. And rather than what was on the front page of some of the newspapers, we found that, 76% of Asian Americans voted for Hillary Clinton.
Wow.
Which is a better number than President Obama. And I think in some of the newspapers, this showed more of a Republican slide, which turned out not to be true. These numbers, I imagine, would get even better if the polling were to be able to be done in language. I think these were not done in language. Of note, I will say that 79% of Asian American women voted for Hillary Clinton and not President-elect Trump. So I think the vast majority of our community did not want to see the country go in the direction that Donald Trump has promised that he will take our country into.
Yeah.
And largely it's because of the really demeaning threatening and violent language that was used throughout the campaign.
Of course.
Many members of our community were targeted by that rhetoric, and specifically targeted by some of the policy proposals that we see.
Mm-hmm.
So I know, Robin, you mentioned a ban on Muslims. There's been talk about reviving the rationale behind the Japanese internment camps to revive a kind of Muslim registry or even a Muslim internment.
Miriam, didn't one of the Trump spokespeople even on television refer to the Japanese internment, a Japanese American internment, which is a mark of profound shame on this country, and for which this country has actually formally apologized. One of his Trump spokesmen referred to it as legal precedent.
That's right.
I mean, something to be imitated? My God, that's staggering.
It is staggering and so harmful, and causes our community to be fearful, right? But also, I think, inspires our community to organize and resist this language, this rhetoric. There is as much of a kind of never again sentiment within our community as we have seen within the Jewish community, right, with some of the anti-Semitic comments also being made.
Right.
And Robin, I know you started out with the model minority myth and some of the historic pieces, but I think it's really important context that some of the most racist and, anti-immigrant laws were actually based on an Asian American experience.
Of course.
For example, the U.S. never even had immigration laws until it passed its very first immigration law, which was the Page Law, which was a law that specifically banned Chinese and Asian women from entering in the country and becoming part of this country. They didn't want the Chinese laborers who are building the railroads and working the mines to start families and to settle.
Right.
And it did so by labeling Chinese women prostitutes and saying they're bringing these kind of immoral values to this country. So one of the first anti-immigrant laws, I mean, Asian American women have the dubious distinction of being the reason why anti-immigrant laws have been written in the first place.
Oh, my God.
That example, I would say, is a big allegory of how reproductive injustice gets baked into our laws, which families get valued, which don't.
Of course. And it's
this
another reason.
Goes way back.
It's another reason why they have to. They feel they have to control reproduction, because if you control, women's bodies, then you've got the heart of what happens to different peoples. Oh God, Miriam, I've called this post-election period the receding floor, because whenever you think it's, you've hit rock bottom, you realize it's just beginning. Tell us about NAPOF, about National Asian Pacific American Women's Forum, that you are the executive director of, because it's a place of hope.
I believe so, and it's certainly the National Asian Pacific American Women's Forum is the country's only national progressive social justice and movement building organization for AAPI women and girls. We have chapters in 16 cities across the country and offices in New York, D.C., Chicago, and Atlanta. And while we're a small but mighty team, we've really focused our work on strengthening and building power for our community. And we do that through movement building, which incorporates policy advocacy, grassroots organizing, leadership development, strategic communications, and research into our communities as well. And this year is our 20th anniversary. I know you're great friends with one of our founders, Helen Zia, who was there.
Yeah. It was
one of our amazing sheroes.
She really is extraordinary. I mean, we worked together at Ms. Magazine, and we worked together ever since, and she's a wonderful writer who's going to be coming out with a terrific book on Chinese women, and I just love her. Anyway, go on. But yes, it was she who networked you and me, so I'm another reason to be grateful to Helen Zia.
Well, one of the main ways we see our work is to raise the visibility of our community. As you mentioned, the model minority myth and stereotype has really caused our community to be silenced.
Yeah.
This mythology that was written in the 60s that somehow Asians were this model or good minority.
Yeah.
Of course, what was happening in the 60s was the civil rights movement, right? So if we're the good minorities, who are the bad minorities? These kind of racial wedge politics have been played against the Asian American community since the 60s. This is all also to the short-term amnesia of Japanese internment, right? Like, just even 20, 30 years before, we were not the model minority. We were the evil empire. So Asian Americans have a true story to tell that is different from the model minority myth, that is different from the perpetual foreigner stereotype. And the reality is that there's enormous diversity in our community. There are over 30 different ethnicities and over 200 different languages that get spoken, vast economic class and education differences, largely because of the way the immigration system is built, right? So while our community consists of some of the scientists and doctors and engineers that were recruited from China and India, it also encompasses Pacific Islanders, right, from Native Hawaiians, but also Southeast Asians who often come as refugees from war. So huge diversity within our community that gets blanketed over when we get lumped together and also when we get invisibilized by some of the stereotypes there.
Right. Well,
so NAPOF is all about making sure we tell the stories from our own voice. And from the true diversity of our community.
That's so important. I mean, the irony to me is that if you take the American out and you just look at, let's say, Asian and Pacific Islander, that's East Asia and that's Southeast Asia, plus the Pacific Islands, we're talking about the majority of the people on the planet.
That's right.
In literal, simple numbers. There, you know, I mean, if I am a creature from another world and I come and I want to say, I wish to meet the representative of the most people on the planet, it would be an Asian or Pacific Islander or South Asian woman. That would be that would be the majority of the representative of the majority on the planet. So the fact that it's an overlooked quote minority in the United States is filled with bitter irony. On the happier front, this time around, you know, when I encounter a straw these days, I just grab onto it and hold tight. The election of Kamala Harris to the Senate, and Tammy Duckworth. And Pramila Jayapal to the House. Those are all signs of tremendous hope. You know, I mean, and
it's true.
And they come
the Senate is now home to 4 women of color. That's the largest number we've ever seen, and 3 of them are Asian or part Asian American, which is tremendous.
Yes, and they come from the community too. They it seems to me, I know a number of them, and they seem ours. They seem women's movement. They seem progressive. They don't seem imposed from outside in a token way on the top. They're really them.
I agree. You know, there is a kind of stereotype and I guess a right-wing fantasy that the Asian American community is going to be more conservative than we actually are.
Yeah, where did that come from? Yes.
Well, I think, again, like the model minority myth, it's partly racial wedge politics. Statistically, Asian Americans tend to stay married. They tend to live in the same house. You know, so all of these kind of quote-unquote social ill indicators, right, around teen pregnancy or about divorce, they're not as prevalent in our community. But I think they're ill-suited factors to really measure wellness, in society, but I think our family problems look a little different than other people's family problems. So to assume that we're not experiencing things that way doesn't erase, I think, many of the needs and problems within our community. So conservatives like to salivate at Asian Americans. Well, they're educated. They tend to be more wealthy, and they stay married. They're like, again, the model kind of minority, right? So why aren't more of them conservatives? Why aren't they more Republican? And when we talk to our community members and when we poll them and do focus groups, there actually are very strong progressive values within our community. Vast numbers of our community support saving the environment and would consider themselves environmentalists. Vast majority of our communities believe in the social safety net and want the strengthening of healthcare and public education. They would rather pay more in taxes than, to get rid of the federal deficit than, to cut services. We're very clear on that. We also support reproductive rights. 72% of Asian Americans support legal abortion. Also very supportive of LGBT communities. So I think because there's so little written about us, we become mythological, right?
Yeah, of course.
And I've used this metaphor before that when you aren't talked to or listened to or seen, you become like a unicorn. And the thing about mythical creatures is that you can overlay whatever you want on them because you don't think they're actually real. So partly the Asian unicorn mythology and the conservative lens is that we ought to be conservative with them. Meanwhile, truth is, I think our community is actually one of the most important communities to organize for progressive change in the future. We're the fastest growing racial minority group in this country, and our values are on the right side of history.
Oh, I feel better. When I try to focus on what good we can bring out of this catastrophe called Trump, it's that movement groups are reaching out, refinding one another, and we are all going to need each other. I mean, and you are one of the people who stands at the nexus of women of color rights, women's rights in general, gay and lesbian rights. I mean, you are one of the linchpin, living, walking, intersectional people. So thank you, Miriam, for all that you do.
Thank you. I do think there are opportunities even in these dark times. And like I said to our members right after the election, in a lot of ways, this election didn't teach us anything new about the world we live in.
Right.
What this backlash actually indicates to me is that we're doing a good job of building power. And when white supremacy gets challenged, it wants to fight back.
Yes.
Now, this is going to be a particularly dangerous period for our community, but I don't want to lose track of the fact that it's a reaction to our own power building, and we must continue that course.
That's right.
We are the future.
Yes, we are. Without us, there is no future. It's just that simple, I'm afraid. Anyway, again, thank you, and for the terrific work that you do. Give the website of NAPAWF.
NAPAWF is www.napawf.org.
napawf.org, a very important organization. Thanks again, Miriam, for being with us. I hope we can come back to you again in the future.
I hope so. Thank you, Robin.
We have to take one last break here at Women's Media Center Live, but don't go anywhere because I, Robin Morgan, will be right back with some fighting words.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And we're back again with some fighting words. I want to start by saying thank you to the many of you who wrote me on Facebook and Twitter and at my website about Goodbye to All That number 3, which was my Fighting Words segment on this program 2 weeks ago before we went on the Thanksgiving week's break. To those of you listeners who wanted to find the considerably longer version and asked how to do so, go to robinmorgan.net and click on blog, which will take you to the page for all of my blogs. I also want to say a word or two about how touching the current similar emotional state we're all in is, or rather how touching is the way we're dealing with it and with each other. Such openness and tenderness even as complete strangers. I grant that I live in New York City, but still it's sort of like you've heard Londoners were during the Blitz, helping each other out, recognizing each other, even if strangers. The woman at the grocery store checkout counter who had weeks and weeks ago admired my Hillary button, so I'd given it to her. She looked at me the other day, eyes tearing, and she said, out of the blue, "I can't sleep." The young man in line behind me, before I could answer, he said, "Oh yeah, me too. I walk the floor at 3 a.m. thinking about what might have been." On the subway, I overhear an older couple, a woman and a man, trading symptoms. "Migraines," he says. "No appetite," she says. They glance at me and we exchange sad, knowing smiles. I say, "Nausea." They nod sympathetically. My pharmacist mutters to me, "I'm so damn angry. I'm so angry all the time." His young assistant, who wears a headscarf, says quietly, "I'm so damn scared all the time." Sometimes it's only even half sentences, unfinished phrases, like, "I stopped reading the morning," and I nod. Or, "I can't watch TV anymore because the news zipper at the bottom." Or, "I went to see a really great, silly, escapist movie, but I still..." If finished, the sentences would all end the same way. "I'm so wretched." It's awful, but the communality of our stunned grief, the commiseration is, if not exactly a comfort, infinitely touching. And if some of the Trump voters tempt me toward becoming one of those revolutionaries who loves humanity but hates people, well, these quiet exchanges with other ordinary Americans like myself bring back hope and some fragile foreshadowing of love. So let's talk about the voting process now that we have yet again faced voter suppression attempts and some successes, and are yet again facing an electoral college win that directly contravenes the popular vote tally, which currently is approaching 3 million for Hillary Rodham. Many other countries do it better than we do here in the land of the free. Voting, I mean. Personally, I believe voting should be federalized and thus consistent, not at the mercy of the differing whims of the states. I also think it should take place nationally over one 3-day weekend, and that anybody still in line at any hour the polls would normally close must have a chance to vote. I mean, this last supposedly is already the case, but ha ha ha. I think registration should be automatic upon reaching age 18, and personally, I believe it should be lowered to 15, possibly younger, but hey, that's for another discussion. I believe that voting should be mandatory, the way you have to have a driver's license and insurance to drive, and the way schooling children, at least up to the 6th grade, is mandatory. Not voting would be penalized by a small but affordable fine, maybe the size of a traffic ticket or else a day or so of community service. You could vote for anyone or write in the name of a candidate if none of the listed ones appealed to you, but you would have to go vote. The 22 and counting countries with some form of mandatory voting have an enviably high population turnout in elections, some as high as 90%. In this country, on the other hand, 46.9% of eligible voters went to the polls in this election, and that's the usual percentage. They never even bothered to vote, almost half. That's appalling and revealing, but most of all, it's changeable. Just think of having an engaged electorate where almost 90% of us turned out to vote. Imagine the difference that would make. Of course, given the incoming administration and its political party, long committed to shrinking the electorate, not to expanding it, the above thoughts are just dreams right now. But other countries had such dreams and made them into reality, and we can too. It'll take a lot of work and organizing. But then again, as my friend, former Colorado Congresswoman Pat Schroeder has said for years, You can't wring your hands and roll up your sleeves at the same time. So bye for now. I gotta go roll up my sleeves. Those are my fighting words. Add yours on Twitter, and be sure to tag us at WMC Live and use the hashtag Fighting Words.
And that's it for today. This program is syndicated, but if you can't find the broadcast on a radio station in your area, you can always visit us at WMCLive.com for the show plus the archive of all our previous episodes, and at iTunes Worldwide, where you can stream, download, and subscribe to our show's podcast. Also, be sure to find WMC Live on Facebook and Twitter. And you can check out my own website and blog at robinmorgan.net and find me on Facebook and Twitter, too. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Opinions expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. WMC President and Executive Producer of this program, Julie Burton, and our founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us, and don't forget to join us next week right here on Women's Media Center Live.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, tune your radio to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on WMCLive.com. Talk radio with a brain.